Hi, I'm Norm Abram. Welcome to the new Yankee workshop. Now, I don't know how it is around your house, but my laundry area needs a way to keep things a little more organized. A place to separate the lights from the darks and the in-betweens. So today we're going to build a laundry center. I'm going to use melamine as the material, and that's perfect for a project like this. I'll show you how to build it next, right here in the new Yankee workshop. Come on over and I'll show you how we're going to start working with these sheets of melamine that we're using for our project. This is a good choice of material. It's durable, it's easy to keep clean, and as long as I keep the edges sealed, it'll be unaffected by any dampness from the clothes. Now, one of the things about this melamine is it's a little bit heavier than I would like, so I reduce it into smaller pieces before I do the fine-tuning at the table saw. You don't want to make any mistakes, so I create these cutting diagrams, which will be included in the plan. For instance, this sheet will get the top, one of the sides, 3 of the doors, and some of the tray parts. Now, we want to get nice straight cuts even at this point, so the best thing to do that with is a good straight edge. Here's one that we've had in the shop for quite a while. It's an aluminum bar with a variable end that you just slide down to full width, drop the clamp over the piece to be cut, and slide it till it's snug, and lock it down on the other end. And there's no way that that's going to move. Now, where you set the clamp is equal to the distance between the edge of the shoe on the saw and the saw blade where you're actually going to make the cut. Now, before we use any power tools, let's take a moment to talk about shop safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the safety rules that come with your power tools. Knowing how to use your power tools properly will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And remember this, there is no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses. Now, another thing I like to do with this particle board or melamine is to wear a mask because the dust can be pretty aggressive. In order to get nice, clean, smooth cuts on this material, you need the right saw blade. Now, this blade actually has a tooth every once in a while that's up a little bit higher, and what it does is it scores the material before you cut through. They're also ground at a very aggressive angle so that you get nice, smooth cuts. I buy this blade specifically as a laminate cutting blade. With my panels cut to size, I'm now ready to make some of the detail cuts. Here I've laid out for the toe kick. Instead of using the straight edge to guide the saw, now I'm going to use this triangle square. The shoe of the saw goes up against the square. I slide it over until I get it exactly where I want it, lock it in place with my hand, and make the cut. The next step is to make a dado in the side pieces to receive the bottom. Now, the melamine is a little over 3/4 of an inch thick. If it had been exactly 3/4 of an inch, I would have used the 2 saw blades and a known set of chippers. But because I need it to be a little bit wider, I have to widen the dado. Now, in the old days, I'd use paper shims, and then later they came up with metal shims and even plastic shims. But with this set, all I have to do is turn this red dial. Every turn gives me 4/1000ths of an inch wider. Now that it's set up, I want to run a sample after I plug the saw back in. Okay, now let's try that on our actual piece and see how that fits. That's going to be good. Now we can run the sides. Here I have one of the partitions which divides the bin areas, and I want to lighten the piece up, so I want to remove some material. much like you would build an airplane. You take out all the material you don't need, which doesn't affect the structural strength. So what I've done is cut a piece of 1/2-inch plywood as a template, attached it with a couple screws, and I'm going to use my router, which has a collar and a 1/2-inch bit. The collar is going to ride up against the side of the plywood. The bit's going to make the cut. Okay, well, that's certainly going to make it a lot lighter, but it's just as strong. At the top of these divider partitions, I'm making a notch on each end, and that's to receive some cleats which will tie the pieces together and be used to secure the top. That 1/4-inch wide groove that's a 1/4-inch deep will receive the back of the cabinet. I made it using a 1/4-inch straight cutting bit and a guide fence. This is the bottom of our cabinet, and that groove will receive the 1/4-inch back. Using my dado head cutter, I've now made a 1/4-inch deep groove in the bottom of the cleat that goes along the back of the cabinet. That too will receive the 1/4-inch back. With the same dado head in place and the addition of a sacrificial fence so that my blade won't hit the metal fence, I formed a tenon on the end of that nailer. That'll fit into the groove of the side panel. Okay, now I'm ready for a little assembly. I have the bottom, one of the sides, a clamp so I'll be able to hold the side in place as I attach it with screws. Now the screws that I'm using are special screws for this material. It's a coarse thread screw, and I also acquire from the same company a bit. It's a step drill. It drills just the right diameter for the thread and for the shank of the screw. And we have a little bit of glue that I'm going to apply in each joint. Perfect. Look how nicely those screws pull it together. Okay, now I'm ready for the 1/4-inch back, and I've applied glue all the way around in the groove. I want this piece to actually be very well glued in place. It'll help keep the cabinet square. Okay, now I'm ready for the toe kick piece, and that's just going to sit in those notches that I made earlier, and once again I'll use some more screws to attach it. Here I've clamped the partitions in place, and I'll attach them by driving some screws through the bottom. I've just cut some slots in this top cleat, which will fall into the notches of the center partitions, and those slots are for biscuits, which I'm going to use to join the cleat to the nailer. Okay, that takes care of the cleat at the front of our carcass. That aligns the partitions, and we'll use it to secure the top. Here I'm laying out the pieces for the face frame. Once it's assembled, it sits at the top edge of the cabinet, and the openings will enclose the flapper doors, which will allow you to throw the soiled laundry into the laundry baskets. The joinery that I'm going to use to connect the pieces is not going to be mortise and tenon. It's simply going to be pocket screw joinery. There's a pocket into which I can get a screw and just assemble the two pieces. To make the pockets, I use my benchtop production pocket cutter. It's really two tools in one. There's a router that as you swing it up through an arc, it actually cuts that pocket to the right depth. And then there is a drill which cuts the hole, or drills the hole for the screw. There's also a clamp which holds it securely in place while you do the operation. A little bit of glue on the ends of the style pieces, slip it together, set the screw in place, and just drive it home. Makes an incredibly strong joint. Here I'm cutting biscuit slots to join the face frame to the cabinet, just like I joined the top cleat to the back nailer. Now let's see if they all line up. Okay, well that takes care of that. The next thing I want to concentrate on is covering all the exposed particle board edges. That's a time-consuming job. We'll do that tomorrow. Well, here it is after 2 hours worth of work covering the exposed edges. Once the tape is applied and trimmed flush, there is no exposed wood and there are no sharp corners. And I like this product better than, say, a high-pressure laminate because it's thin and there's no black line left behind after it's applied. The material itself is a polyester material and it has a hot melt adhesive on the back. You can apply it with an ordinary household iron, but I found if you use a heat gun to melt the adhesive, it works just as well. The trick is learning how long to hold the gun in place, and you get used to it after a while, moving it back and forth constantly, and once you feel that it's actually melted, you can either use a piece of wood to stick it down, or use a J-roller. Now at the corners where there is an intersection, I simply overlap the pieces and don't glue them in place right away. Once I'm set, I just take my utility knife, trim the piece that I want to remove, take it out of the way, and then heat it up and bond it to the edge. Okay, now once the band is adhered to the edge, the first thing that I do is trim the length, just using an ordinary utility knife. Now to trim the edge flush, I have a special trimmer. It's a piece of plastic at a 90-degree angle, and there's a razor knife on the inside. And I just run it down the edge. Nice. Well, that pretty much takes care of the carcass. Now I want to work on the flapper doors through which we throw the soiled laundry. So I've cut a blank the right size, and I want to cover the edges of the melamine again. Now I could use the same method that I just showed, but I have this edge banding machine. A roll of the tape fits on a holder. It goes through some guides, and this is a heat gun that actually heats up the adhesive as the tape passes by. Takes a couple minutes for it to heat up. Now that it's heated up, what I do is hand feed the tape by the blower at just a nice steady pace, and when it comes out to this pinch roller, I can then move my blank into position and slowly slide it forward. Now when I get about 3 inches from the pinch roller, I hit this guillotine, which cuts the tape off, and then I can complete the edge. Now all I have to do is trim it. The first thing I do is cut it to length, just using my utility knife. Nice clean cut. And once again, I turn to my trimming tool to make it flush with the edge. And now we do the other end. Now there's a couple things to keep in mind as we do these edges. Moving the tape by the heat gun at the right speed to melt the adhesive, and keeping the edge of the piece we're trying to edge tightly against that pinch roller so that I get a really good bond. Here's one of the flapper doors in place, and you can see how it works. Now for the hardware, I'm using a pivot hinge, which I picked up at my woodworker's supply store. The first thing I have to do for the installation is drill holes for these little bushings near the top of the stiles on the face frame. The corresponding part of the hinge goes on the inside of the door. I set it against the edge, drill a pilot hole, and then attach it with screws. The part of the hinge that goes on the door actually can come apart. I leave one intact, slide it into the left-hand side, then take just the pin section, slide it into my sleeve, slip the door into place, and attach it with a screw. And that's all there is to that. Let me show you how these laundry baskets are going to be stored in the carcass. I'm going to put them on full extension trays so they'll come all the way out and be able to be picked up and taken over to the washing machine. Now the trays are going to be made out of more of the melamine. Here are the pieces for the backs, here are the side pieces, and the fronts are slightly wider. I've already treated all the exposed edges, and now I want to make a groove to receive the bottom. So I've set up the stacked dado head cutter for a 1/4 inch width, 3/8 of an inch depth. I just have to run the pieces through. Well, now I'm ready for a little assembly for the bins. No glue at the corners, just a butt joint. I'll pre-drill 2 holes for those special fasteners that we used earlier. Now I will put a few spots of glue in the groove before I install the bottom, and that'll help keep the tray square. I'll just slide this in and attach the other side using the same methods. Okay, well that takes care of the trays. Now let's install the slides. The trays ride on these full extension slides that'll carry up to 100 pounds of weight. The first part of the slide that I install goes inside the carcass. I use these plywood blocks to be sure that it's parallel with the floor of the cabinet. I pre-drill holes for the screws and simply drive the screws tight. The corresponding part of the slide is centered on the tray, and it gets attached with a few screws. Okay, now that takes care of the pull-out trays. Let's make some doors. Now our doors are made up of more melamine panels that are edge banded, And what I've done here is clamped it in position so that it's even with the frame. And now I'll attach it with some screws from the inside. First I'll drill a pilot hole through the front of the tray. I'm using these screws and finish washers. Okay, one more to go. And that's what the handles look like. Well, now I'm ready for the countertop. Another piece of melamine, bottom side is facing up right now, and I'm going to build up the edge with some scraps of plywood, because I'm not going to wrap the edge with the polyester, I'm going to wrap it with real wood. So I'm just using a bit of glue and some brads to attach these pieces. I found a nice piece of white oak, which I've jointed and ripped to the correct size, putting a little bit of glue on the back side. I've mitered the corners, and I'll nail it in place with some 1.5-inch brads. To take the sharpness off the edges of the oak band, I'm rounding it over with a 1/4-inch radius rounding bit. Before I set the cabinet on the carcass, I'm going to drill some holes for the screws that I'll use to attach it. One of the last things I want to do to this base cabinet is cover these screws that are exposed. Now the manufacturer makes little buttons with a pin on them that simply fits into the Phillips head, and it covers it up. All right, let's see how this unit works. I've put the laundry baskets in the pull-out trays, so they just get hidden away. And then I get my laundry. Boy, I do gather up a lot of laundry. Now let's see. Darks, they'll go in here. First one. And let's see, mediums, they'll go in here. And whites, they'll go in this last one. Now I can keep all my laundry organized.